2020. We are at the Chaska Event Center tonight to allow for social distancing. So to call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Appreciate it. For joining us, not me. With that, Nate, will you call roll, please?
Yes, Councilmember Hatfield.
Here.
Councilmember
Here.
Councilmember Wong. Here. Councilmember Grau.
Here.
And Mayor Winchell.
Adopting the agenda, corrections to the agenda. If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Wong.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Grau to adopt the agenda. Discussion. Hearing none, I will call roll. Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Yes.
Councilmember Grau.
Yes.
And Mayor Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. Sorry, I got to get a graph here. All right. That will move into visitor presentation. And what I'm showing here, first up is a presentation by Kristen Bartley. Is Kristen on, Kevin? I don't think she's here.
Yep, she's on.
Yep, here we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to return to the City Council to propose a modification to the Chaska's ordinance to allow backyard chickens. Much of the reason I came today was, again, to talk about encouraging sustainability. An increasing number of us are interested in living more sustainably, and many communities are encouraging citizens to reduce waste and consumption of resources. Backyard chickens allow us to reduce our carbon footprint by producing some of our own food. Every food item we can produce organically or on our own property is one less item that must be shipped to us or shopped for. Every item of food we raise ourselves represents a step in living a greener and more sustainable lifestyle. Chickens are friendly, social, intelligent, affectionate, entertaining, low maintenance, and small, quiet, and relatively inexpensive to keep, as well as being quieter and less of a nuisance than dogs and cats. Suburban and city dwelling children have the opportunity to understand and participate in learning where our food comes from. The current version of our city ordinance is at odds with today's understanding of the necessity of green living to make our city more sustainable. Many of our ordinances have not been updated since 1979. I sent you all a PowerPoint that I'm not sure if you're able to follow along on. I know you guys had a lot of great information given to you during the working session just a little bit ago, and I don't want to be redundant or take a ton of your time with it. The first couple pages of the PowerPoint is just basically our current ordinance of what is determined an animal and versus a livestock. You probably don't need to know that. And I think as far as animal nuisances, when it comes to a dog or a cat or a chicken, every person that is in violation of the ordinance should be given a citation if the owners are not complying with said ordinance. Typically, chickens are not noisy animals. The roosters are known more for their crowing, and that's something that in this ordinance would not be allowed. It would be to have a rooster. Typically, when hens are laying eggs, they squawk, and the decibel level that is typical is around 60 decibels where you have barking dogs, 90 decibels, lawnmowers, leaf blowers, passing trucks. You're in the 80 to 100 decibel range. So typically it's not an issue. As far as chickens and public health, as any animal, they do pose an issue. With dogs and cats, you have rabies and parasites and tick-borne illnesses. Salmonella is definitely one that people worry about. And seeing the CDC's website, there are currently 6 cases of salmonella in 2020 in Minnesota. Typically, backyard coops can be attractive and clean, and it's not your typical shed situation. People take pride in having it as being an attractive part of their yard. And as far as smell goes, 5 hens generally generate less manure than 1 medium-sized dog. And if you do the math, it breaks down to about 200 pounds a year. And that includes maybe bedding material if you have sand or wood chips that also go along with that. I also did a little bit of research with cities in the area. So I'm on slide 7. Out of the 62 cities that I've seen, there are 51 that allow, certain ones have restrictions like Minnetonka with acreage, but there's also 11 that say no. In those 11, Apple Valley, Arden Hills, Chanhassen, Hopkins, and Plymouth are currently working on changing their ordinances. I reached out to, I think, 12 cities that I was able to get responses from some people. It depended, depending on the city, it was difficult to figure out who to contact, whether you contacted the police department or the city clerk, as far as getting information on animal calls, the complaints for the chickens per year, and if they did believe that predators were drawn into their community based on having chickens. And in the slide, you can see I talked to Eden Prairie. They've been doing this since 2017, and they only have 15 registered people. So I feel like that's a concern, is that people are gonna just go balls to the wall here, say it, and just do it. But people are really caring about this. And if only 15 people out of the 65,000 residents are doing that in Eden Prairie, and we have half the population here, it may not be that big of an issue. And there's more detailed information regarding predators, that they haven't seen anything, but it doesn't mean it's not there. I had spoken with Shakopee and Blaine. They don't have any complaints for this year. And then Shakopee as well. And you can see that their other animal complaints are well into the hundreds every year. Egan's very similar with their dog and cat calls are very high, and they haven't had any chicken issues. Edina, similar, and mostly it has to do with more with inquiries than complaints. And I think this is one of the cities that they don't have a permit process. And I know that with Chaska, it's important to have a permit process, especially that we're possibly doing this and being super new. But there are several cities that don't have a permit process with it all. And St. Louis Park is also with that a per application basis. I included, so Waconia is on here now that they allow chickens. I included a sample or it's their ordinance and a checklist, which is great for the homeowner and for someone that's issuing a permit. And there's also an application that you can do online and sign and have your dimensions on where you're going to be putting this coop and run. So similar to a lot of cities, Chaska does not have animal control. And I went through Chaska's calls, and there were 1,267 calls from 2016 to 2020. And then the other animal calls are mostly wild animals, and also including, the emu of 2017 issue that we had. I've gained a lot of community support this time around. I know I came 5 years ago with just me thinking I could just come and say, this makes sense. But I've been next door and the different Chaska pages and did a change.org again. And I had 202 Chaska residents sign the petition since May 22nd. So there was a working session in 2016, and there were some comments that were made from J-Row specifically about it being troublesome for the police department to keep up with. And I did make a note that you can see many cities don't have an issue with getting the police called on their chickens. Usually things work out for themselves. And I know Abby from the U of M had talked about cold weather issues, because Paula had mentioned that she was wondering if they would just kind of freeze to death during the winter. But Abby explained that's not necessarily the case, that they're pretty hardy animals. And if you take care of them properly, it's not an issue. As far as the predators go, typically they're already here, and in keeping a proper structure and just adhering to those guidelines, predators typically aren't an issue. So if you dig down a certain amount and have chain link or different mesh material so that animals don't dig and birds of prey can't get in, it's typically not an issue. J. Rowe had also stated that you can just go to the store and get eggs and get food. And we've all seen in the past couple of months that there has been food shortages, and it, cage-free, organic or not. So being able to live sustainably has never been more prevalent and a right that we should have, especially during these just crazy times. One more comment I wanted to make about the working session from last time was J. Rowe had stated that if you want to do that, to buy a hobby farm and just move. And I felt like that comment was pretty disheartening when you're just coming for something so pretty basic. We live in Chaska. I grew up here. I'm raising my boys here, and we just can't imagine living in another community. So we're hoping that just a small change could really liven this city up a little bit and be more in line with the others. There were some questions that I made note of from the working session. The permit fees that there was a question about, I've seen typically run from $50 to $75 per permit. So if you're looking at numbers and seeing who's going to be doing this kind of thing in the city, that's kind of where that's at. The other thing, I've spoken to a few realtors in the area, and they didn't really seem that home values were that really affected by having a chicken coop. You can always take it down if you don't want it, but typically it hasn't been an issue. And I only talked to 3. There's many more that may have different opinions, but the 3 I talked to didn't really see a problem. Chickens do eat Japanese beetles, which is beneficial. I have a linden tree that it's crazy, and they do eat Japanese beetles. The neighbor sign off could be a little bit of an issue. Sometimes I feel like it's asking if you can have a dog, just asking permission. I get where it's a little bit different, but I feel like it could be like just asking your neighbor if you would, hey, do you mind if I get a dog? But I think that's about it. My proposal to the city is allowing up to 5 hens in an enclosure that's predator and weatherproof. Maintained properly, clean from filth, all the grain and food stored, be in a predator proof or varmint proof container. Shouldn't be able to have roosters or to slaughter chickens on your property. And then there are certain guidelines that can be adjusted on where a coop is set on your property line. If you're on city property or neighboring property, that can definitely be discussed. And anyone that violates the ordinance should be treated just as someone that's violating the ordinance for dogs and cats. And that's all I have.
Well, anybody have any questions for Kristen? I guess that we kind of went over a lot of the things that you talked about at the work session. I assumed you were on, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you heard the end result that we're going to move forward and see what things will look like as we move into the next step and just kind of go from there and see what's next.
Yes, that sounds great. And my hopes is that I know a lot of the information that I had given was redundant, but that you could work with the community and the desires of the community as well to find a good balance with what works for everybody.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't have, was there anyone else that was speaking toward the issue of chickens? I don't have another name on here, but I see.
Nope. Abby was in on the working session from the U of M.
All right. Okay, well, thank you for that. And like I said, you'll just look forward to see. I won't make a guarantee when that will come out to us because we have to do some investigating with our homeowners associations, as you heard. And when something comes up, I assume she'll be notified. Kristen would be? Okay, so we would be able to let you know when our next steps are.
Great. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else on for visitor presentation? Kevin, do you see anything? Okay, so we will move past visitor presentation at this point and move to item 6, which is approving previous meeting minutes. Again, if there are no corrections or additions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Hubbard.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hatfield. Discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Aye.
Councilmember Gra.
Aye.
Member Hatfield.
Yes.
Chair Winchell. Passes 5-0. All right, moves us on to consent agenda items. And again, these are items that we need to approve, but not necessarily have any conversation, but any one item can be pulled out if necessary. With that, if there are no comments or questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve consent.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Wong.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hubbard. Discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Hubbard.
Yes.
Councilmember Gra.
Yes.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Wong.
Aye.
Mayor Winchell, aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Just a quick note, so for the resolution in support of the amendment, should we get that to Ms. Haheim or who should we get that to?
Yes, to Nancy Hoffman.
Yep, okay, we'll do that.
Okay. All right, we will move on then to item number 8, adopting resolution 2020-57, ordinance 977, approving final plot and rezoning of Del Webb of Chaska. Got that, Matt? You?
Just 1 second.
That's fine. I don't know if Kevin was jumping in or who was.
All right, so, Mayor and Councilmember, the item you see in front of you tonight is the final plat and plans for the, and rezoning for the proposed Webb community, Pinnacle Heights on the former Hammers property. This is one that did go through the final process a few months ago. And with some of the changes that we saw during the COVID and also some things that needed to occur technically, it's just coming back to you guys now, just as the preliminary did a couple meetings ago. So a lot of this you guys have talked about very recently and have seen, basically the direction that that was going. Kevin, I'm not sure if you or Liz are going to be the ones that present it, but basically they'll focus on some of the items that were some of the remaining items left in looking at getting that development to a final place. So, Liz, is it you or Kevin? I can't see
Me.
you.
Sorry.
Okay,
if you can't
Liz.
see
There we
me
go.
right
Oh,
now.
now I can
but
see you.
Perfect.
All right.
Yep. So I'll be sharing my screen here. Just a second, please. Full screen mode. Oops. Okay. Can you all see that? I'm going to switch to full screen mode here. Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. We have a final plat and rezoning application tonight for Pinnacle, also known as Del Webb at Chaska, being proposed by Pulte Homes. So to give you a refresher on where the site is located, it's highlighted here in this aerial exhibit in red. It's just north of downtown Chaska in the Fireman's Clay Hole Lake. There's single family residential kind of on its northern side. You have the Crown of Glory Church just off to the northeast of
You have
it.
something up, Liz. We're not seeing that.
We
You might have
just
it
see
on the wrong
the
screen.
RFA.
For action.
Staff report up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me pull this.
You could see something, obviously the wrong thing.
I always choose
you go.
the wrong window. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the aerial exhibit I was referring to previously. And then here's kind of a zoomed in perspective if we need to refer back to it at any point. But it was in June of this year that the Planning Commission did recommend approval of this final plat and rezoning. So we are asking the City Council tonight to make a motion to adopt the final plat or the resolution approving the final plat and then an ordinance approving the rezoning. So as that breaks down, the final plat is a proposal for 92 lots that are specifically catered to the active older adult, 55 and older, also known as a Del Webb community by Pulte Homes. And within those 92 lots, 90 of them will be for their detached single family. One of the lots will be for their amenity center. And then lastly, one of their lots will be for the historic Hammer Saloon. So the overall acreage that the final plat is encompassing is about 34 acres of land for the detached single family homes that are being created or lots that are being created. And then the rezoning request, the property in question, the entire Hammers property is currently zoned open, which is essentially a holding zoning district until it gets redeveloped and rezoned. So we are asking you to make a motion to approve a rezoning from the open zoning district to a PRD 75 zoning district for the entire property. I did want to make note that there was a small modification done to the ordinance document since it got posted, and it related to the minimum square footage for the amenities center itself, and then making an option for an indoor and outdoor pool. This is the final plat drawing, which I'll also kind of use to kind of go over some of the main points of the layout of the development itself. The main access into the development will come from Highway 41 on the east side. So MnDOT did approve a right-in access into the development. So that will act as kind of the main entrance drive into the overall development, which is pretty notable for a Del Webb community. They have to have those grand entrance drives into their developments. Cardinal Street will also provide additional access into the neighborhood. This will be realigned due to the introduction of a new access onto Highway 41. So they are showing kind of that new right-of-way delineation for the realignment of Cardinal Street. Ultimately, when these other areas do get platted, there will be additional access into the development from stub streets from the north. One item to mention is that the Crown of Glory will be accepting or acquiring a small parcel of land from the land swap that they had to do for the access onto Highway 41. So essentially, Pulte Homes did have to gain some acreage to gain access onto Highway 41. So as in exchange for some of the land being taken for that, they are going to get some acreage back for that land being transferred. The grand entrance basically provides access into the development, but ends at where the amenity center is being located, which is towards the western side of the development, which will butt up against the bluff edge there. And I'll have a more detailed drawing of that later on here. Another thing to note and refresh you on is that they'll have 3 different lot types or home types within this development. And when I say that, I'm talking about the size of the lots and the homes that they're providing. So 122, and this is looking at the grand scheme of the overall development. 122 of the lots will be their smaller 44-foot wide lots. 89 of the lots will be kind of their medium 50-foot wide lots. And then 57 of the lots will be their larger 60-foot wide lots, which are mainly situated around the bluff edge and perimeter of the development. And then lastly, they will have an additional lot for the historic Hammer Saloon, kind of where the Cardinal Street and Del Webb Parkway intersection are. So
Liz,
yep.
question on that. So who is the Hammer Saloon still be getting refurbished or whatever by a private citizen?
Yes, at this time, they're still working with Kristen Case, who is a Chaska resident. She has basically enlisted herself to refurbish the structure. So they are still working out kind of the details on that. And she did get HPC approval earlier this year in March to do some of the exterior work on the house itself. So they're still working with Pulte Homes to kind of stay in line with their agreement with the parcel in that home.
Is that being moved or is that in the actual location of?
It's in the actual location. So that structure won't move whatsoever.
Who would be the ultimate owner of that when this is done?
Kristen Case would be, if she can solidify all of her financing and refurbishing cost estimates.
What happens if something happens there and that falls through? What happens to that?
Then it will be demolished and just be kind of open land.
Okay. I was just trying to understand that.
Yep. So there's still potential that that could happen, but the way it's been moving right now, Kirsten Case has been able to keep moving forward to help hopefully renovate that structure back to its original intent. And then lastly, due to this pretty steep grade change out to the highway access, there will be a retaining wall basically on the south side, or I'm sorry, on the north side of where that grand entrance drive will be. And it will range in height from 8 to 13 feet and down to 6 feet, kind of as it wraps around this corner of Cardinal Street. Here's a more zoomed in perspective of the grand entrance access, showing some monument signage and kind of what their intent is for the landscaping along this entrance drive. So if you looked at any of the landscape plans for the development itself, they are doing quite a hefty amount of landscaping, specifically in the median or the grand entrance drive, to really create that, again, grand entrance as you're coming into the development itself.
And I know we touched on it here. Are you going to touch on the entrance signs later on in your presentation?
I can talk about them right now. It might be better to talk about them during this exhibit.
That was one of the things that, I mean, they showed a lot of pictures of different designs now. Do they have one that's locked in for here?
Yes.
They have a whole bunch of them. Is there like 5 or 6 of them that they're putting in, and what will they be like?
Yeah.
Entrances.
So I apologize that this little exhibit on the bottom here is small, but basically what you see here is kind of what they're proposing for the entrance. So it'll line up kind of on both sides of this grand entrance drive. And the purpose of those other drawings that were included in that monument sign packet was to show what they've done at other Del Webb communities, for us to understand kind of, you know, they're trying to stay in line with their trademark or their logo or their branding that they propose for these type of developments. They tend to be larger, therefore they kind of have larger monument signs, specifically at the grand entrances, to kind of complement the scale of the development. And then this, where I'm highlighting my cursor, they will be doing some secondary monuments in towards the other street entrances, but these will be smaller ones compared to what we see at the front here, so scaled down towards the inner parts of the development. So they'll kind of demarcate where their development starts. Bless you. Did you have any other questions on the monument signage that you want me to go over?
Well, like I said, I just was curious how big they are coming in off the other streets. Not that they're so overpowering.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I can't really read that.
So
Yeah, the ones on towards the inner parts of the development will be 2 feet wide by 2 feet wide or 2 feet deep. So they'll be pretty minimal. And then the height of them will be 5 to 6 feet tall towards the inner. So that'll be more scaled down to be more appropriate with kind of those secondary entrances into the development.
I guess I'm still confused, Liz. If I look at the examples, is the one that they really go into depth is this Bellwether by Delwood? Is that the one that they're proposing that will be in chat? But it'll say Del Webb at chat in Chaska.
No, so the drawing that they're proposing is what's highlighted here. So it's kind of more
Huge.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I apologize. It's tiny.
Can you zoom in on that, Liz?
Let's see.
It is bigger in our packet. Like,
Yeah.
I do know that.
I can, let me exit out of here for just a second. And I
But,
don't
I
know if
mean,
it's
okay.
gonna get any,
Where did you get that? Was that in
It
her
was in the
packet?
packet. It's under supporting documents, monuments.
Yeah.
It's
The
about
monument
it's
signs
a
is a
very, very
separate-
last page on it.
yep.
It was the second to last attachment.
It's page 14 of that.
8 foot is like.
Yeah, it seems to me from this little drawing that it's similar to others in the community. I don't know if that's a fair statement, but
It is a little bit different in terms of scale, but I mean, the Harvest has something similar in terms of a scale component. They have those corn crib monument signs to markate all of the entrances into the development. This wouldn't be a lot different than that. Again, this is kind of more true to their identity and what they've done at other Del Webb developments.
But those two pillars are pretty similar in size to the corn cribs at the Harvest, right?
Yep, these are.
Yeah, they're 8.5 feet tall. So.
And the other question I had was just naming. Is it going to be, where did I see that here? It's just going to say Del Webb at Chaska versus some of the other ones have names like Bellwether and Chateau Elan.
Yeah, I think this one's specifically just Del Webb at Chaska. I can have Chad, who's here in behalf of Pulte, to further clarify if they're doing anything more than that, like incorporating the Pinnacle name at all. But from my understanding, it's just the Del Webb at Chaska.
Liz, this is Chad from Pulte Homes. Yes, we are working on the final marketing name, but currently we're just utilizing the Del Webb at Chaska for now. But we will be modifying the name to the actual marketing name.
I'm assuming, I'm not assuming, I'll ask the question. When you look at names, you look at marketing names and you got whole departments that probably do that. I like how City of Chaska's incorporated the city elements and those types of things. Is that typically, now I don't know enough about these examples you gave me to know like why Chateau is Chateau and Lakewood Ranch. I mean, like out of curiosity, do you blend it into kind of the neighborhood themes, historical, those types of things when you think of a marketing name?
Yes, so that typically is what happens, and that's definitely a whole different department than the development department that I'm in. So, but they take into account historical factors, something unique about the site, things like that to put together their naming.
Thank you.
One quick question in regards to the monuments, just in case I missed it in looking it up. But so I know there's a few spots for them off the main, but off the Liberty Heights Drive entrance, from the other existing neighborhood, is that going to be a same exact size monument in that corner there?
So it will be scaled down.
Okay.
So it won't be the same size as this. So what they've said is they'll scale it down to 2/3 the size of this one. So this one's 3 feet wide by 3 feet deep and then 8.5 feet tall.
Sure.
The ones at the other entrance, or the Liberty Heights Drive and Moores Drive, will be scaled down to 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep, and then almost up to 6.5 feet or 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding the monument signs?
And I assume that they're either leaving land for those to put those
Right.
on there, or are they incorporated on a lot?
No, they'll be on their own outlots.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'm good.
And then this is a zoomed in perspective of where they're at with the amenity center and programming that. So in this display, they're showing about a 7,200 square foot clubhouse building, also denoted as the amenity center on here, which will include a fitness center and locker rooms, social lounge, activity and craft room, some meeting rooms, as well as a kitchen. They're also showing an outdoor pool, bocce ball courts, pickleball courts, and then an outdoor fire pit kind of gathering area. These details are pretty close to kind of what they're planning to do. They will finalize kind of the overall details of the amenity center area, because what they typically do is survey the residents within the area or people who are looking to buy in this area to really finalize the details of what they really want out there. And then here's a couple slides of the differences of the 44-foot wide, 50-foot wide, and 60-foot wide lots and homes. So the 44-foot wide lots will have a 34-foot wide home. These will be slab on grade homes with no basements, and they'll range in size from 1,300 up to 1,700 square feet. They'll have 2 bedrooms, 2 car garages, and they'll range in price from the high 200,000 to mid 300,000. And then the 50-foot wide lots, as you can see, a little bit wider than the 44-foot wide one. So these will have 40-foot wide homes. Basements will be an optional additive on these. They'll range in size from 1,600 almost up to 2,000 square feet. There'll be 2 bedrooms with a 3rd bedroom or bonus room option, 2 car garages, and then a mid $300,000 to mid $400,000 range. And then lastly, the 60-foot wide lots. So these will mainly be around the perimeter of the development, backing up to the bluff edge. These will be 50-foot wide homes, basements. They'll be approximately 2,000 square feet and more, 2 bedrooms with a 3rd bedroom option. And then these will have the space for a 3rd car or a 3rd stall additive. And then they'll range in price from the high 300,000s to low 500,000. So in conclusion, we are asking you to make 2 motions tonight. One is to adopt resolution number 2020-57, which is approving the final plat for the 92 lots for Del Webb at Chaska, and then based on the conditions that are listed within that resolution. And then the second motion you're making would be to adopt ordinance number 977, which is approving the rezoning from open to planned residential district number 75. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, Chad with Pulte is here to help answer questions as well.
Questions up here? We had a pretty lengthy conversation the last time we had this before us. Nobody up here got questions? Okay. I'm sure there's people in the neighborhood listening as well. Kevin, does anyone have a hand up? This is not a public hearing, but would you allow people to speak if they have something different than asked of before?
There's not currently any hands up or anything in the chat.
All right. Well, with that, then if there's no questions here and no comments from the audience, I would entertain a motion to adopt resolution 2020-57. Approving final plots for 92 lots for Del Webb. Motion by Councilmember Hatfield.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wong to Again, adopt resolution 2020-57 approving final plot for 92 lots at Del Webb at Chaska based on conditions listed therein. Discussion.
Just want to comment, I know that this neighborhood and this whole process has been a long process for the neighborhood, for the developer and all of those. And I do also just want to make sure to appreciate those individuals who weighed their opinions and concerns and make sure that, you know, the lack of questions and conversations, at least for me personally, isn't a disrespect to the neighborhoods or anything like that. It's that you have been heard and that, you know, I think this continues to be kind of this what's good for Chaska, big for Chaska piece. I still understand and know that there's some conversation about the park area up there and that, you know, we'll continue to look and utilize that park space as that as the existing development can have opinion on kind of what that space would go. And I appreciate that commentary several meetings ago as well. So I just wanted to do that. I know we're kind of quiet up here on this topic tonight when other nights we've spent 2 hours talking about this topic. So I just wanted to mention that because I didn't want to truly do a disservice for those who have spoke up on both sides of the issue and just kind of mention that and thank them for that and continue to know that they were heard. And, you know, I think this will be a good addition to the city of Chaska. And, you know, I hope it's successful because it'll bring in and keep people in the community.
Yeah, I'll comment. You know, I did a little research on the Del Webb community that was up in Corcoran, and just looked at some of the houses and the layout and was really impressed. It seems, I mean, you know, 268 homes is, I mean, it's a lot of homes in a neighborhood and things, but I think that it's, you know, I didn't see any negative feedback from it, you know, from that neighborhood, and was overall impressed. And I really liked how they kind of laid out what the HOA fees go. I'm a big HOA person. What fees go towards. I felt like it was very well explained. And so a lot of my questions had been kind of answered just in the information provided. So.
And I agree too. I think that we had a good conversation. Unfortunately, not everyone feels the way that we do at this point, but I think everyone knew that there'd be a development there, and maybe it wasn't. When you've had a big open field for years, it's just hard to have change and that kind of construction atmosphere and stuff like that. But I do too think that it's something. I just had a resident come up here tonight and said that she had to move into a single living home and couldn't find one in Chaska and had to move to Carver. So the need is still there for that type of living. And we've heard that for years, that that's the type of living that we're looking for. So I'm excited. I don't know a lot about Del Webb, but everything that I hear about it has been positive. So I'm excited to see this project move forward. So, all right. Anyone else? If not, I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Grah.
Yes.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Yes.
And Mayor Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. All right, now I would accept a motion for, she took my second thing away here, so I got to read it again. So I need a motion to adopt ordinance 977 approving the rezoning from open O to PRD 75. Motion by Councilmember Grah. Second by Councilmember Hubbard. Discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Aye.
Councilmember Grah.
Yes.
And Councilmember Winchell, aye. So passes 5-0. All right. Thanks everyone for being here, and we'll move on to item 8B, which is adopt resolution 2020-59 approving concept plan for Harvest West,
Mayor and council member, the item coming to you tonight is actually come from the Planning Commission at the last meeting. This is a harvest. It's called Harvest West North. I consider it the Harvest Northwest, but it's basically it's on the north side of Highway 44 on the west side of Savannah. Basically up in the northwest corner. We already had the plans approved for the stuff that sort of happened close to Highway 44. This is the stuff that's happening up closer to the Creek Road area up to the north. So this is a concept plan at this point, is being recommended from the Planning Commission for approval, and I'll turn it over to Liz to present it.
Thank you, members of the council, and Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be sharing my screen again here. Hopefully I'll get it right this time. Can you see that? Perfect. All right. So like Matt mentioned, we have a concept plan request tonight, specifically for the Harvest West North that's being proposed by the Traditions Development. So here's an aerial exhibit showing the actual site that we're looking at tonight. As Matt mentioned, this is kind of the north side of the Harvest West area. The area to the south of this development, or to this project area, has already been approved and final platted. So this is all good to go and ready to be built on. So the remaining portion of the Harvest West area remains to be seen on the north side. So it's bound on the east side by Savannah Way, which is the newer collector road. We have Highway 212 to the west here, a couple single family residences to the north, and then Creek Road bounding it also on the north side. So in terms of a background of this site, the concept plan for the Harvest West, which is kind of the south side in blue here, was approved back in March of 2018. So there are approximately 125 lots included in this overall area. Within that approval was also the inclusion of a 12-acre public park space, which you'll see kind of in a later exhibit as well. So that area has been basically planned for it to be programmed as a public park, which is in line with our comprehensive plan and Southwest Chaska plan. And the area to the south in blue here have also received final platting, which was approved in both 2019 and just recently this year. So they are all good to go in the blue portion. So when we say Harvest West North, we're essentially calling out this red area just to the north of this final platted area. So what they're requesting tonight is a concept plan approval for 119 lots, and how that breaks down, which is also consistent with what they provide in the south side. So 85 of those lots will be for kind of their traditional detached single family, and then 34 of those lots will be their villa product, which is also detached single family, but are situated for kind of that single level living type product, which caters to the empty nester. So in terms of what they're proposing, it is consistent with both the Southwest Chaska plan and the overall comprehensive plan for this area. They've included a site forces and existing conditions exhibits in their overall application. So the area, which is now highlighted in purple here, the overall acreage of this area is about 48 acres. And as you can see, most of it has been farmed over the years, which was pretty consistent with what the south side was utilized for. They did delineate 3 wetlands on the site. So 2 of them are kind of situated on the western side, and then the other larger one is situated more so on the northeastern side of this site. It's also important to note that they do have 2 major street frontages, one on Savannah Way, which is our local collector road, and then one along Highway 212. Luckily, there's already an existing 20-foot high berm which they've called out here on the west side. So screening along the highway won't be an issue. So it's more so kind of discussing what happens along the edge of Savannah Way. Another important piece to note for this property is that there is a significant grove of oak trees kind of in the center of this project area. So it has been denoted as a pretty significant piece to incorporate into the development, and you'll see that in a later exhibit here. And it does connect into where the public park space has already been shown to be incorporated. So the city park area is just to the south and kind of dissects the center of this project area. So this area is already platted and planned for. So with kind of the grove of oaks next to it, it seemed like a beneficial connection point with the city park space. This is their proposed site plan. Again, everything that they're proposing is delineated in red. So the overall encompassing factor of this is it will provide 119 lots. Like I said before, 34 of those lots will be their villa lots, which will be situated on the west side of the development. So it will basically be its own cul-de-sac extending off of the existing street system. There are other villa products just to the south, so this will be a natural connection and extension of the villa product on the west side. And they have it noted as kind of the turquoise and orange colors here. And the difference between these are the turquoise colors are your front-loaded garage villas, and then the orange ones are their side-loaded garage villas. And then on the east side, there will also be two other cul-de-sacs, again, extending and connecting into the existing street system to the south there. The green side is what they call their legacy lots, which is actually a newer housing product that they're introducing into this development. It'll be a smaller lot product, but it will still look and generally feel like the same detached single family product that you see in their existing developments. And these will be 55 feet wide lots. And then lastly, their heritage lots, which are their more traditional lots that they've included in other developments, are the 65-foot wide lots, and those will be kind of more so along the edge of the park space here. In terms of access into this area, they are showing an alignment with an existing access into the Harvest neighborhood to the east. So this is Farm Hill Boulevard, and that will essentially be extended to the west to provide kind of that main access into this newer area. There's an additional access just to the south off of Vista View Drive, which connects Savannah Estates into the south side of the Harvest West neighborhood area.
So is that the entrance that already exists into there, or are you saying that's an auxiliary? I kind of missed that.
It's an existing entrance. So if you've driven down, it's an existing entrance into the Harvest West area.
Okay, so part of that comes into the area, if that's the main road, part of this is already in the area that they're already working on then, correct?
Right. So this new area will be an extension off of that older area, or that's already being worked on.
Where is the existing road?
The existing road is right here.
Okay.
Basically where I'm showing my cursor. So they have pavement up to a certain point. They're still working on, you know, putting the pavement down for these others.
That's all paved.
But, yep, but this stretch, yep. So most of it is paved right now. Yep.
But there'll be an additional entrance on the Savannah Way up there then?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Right on Farm Hill Boulevard. So that'll line up with the other Harvest development entrance to the east. So there's, you have the entrance to Savannah Estates to the south here, and then just to the north there, there's another harvest entrance on the east. So they're basically showing in alignment with that.
So that'll
access.
be the only, there won't be any new entrances anymore that somebody will have to deal with in the future?
Nope. These will be the only 2 entrances into the Harvest West North.
I could not get to these maps, so I'm seeing these for the first time. It would not let me get to them for some reason.
Oh, well, feel free to ask any more questions if I can help clarify some things for you. So the center portion of the project area, when I talked about the groves of trees, they've kind of denoted it as a conservation corridor. So it'll be more of a passive area, but it will help to preserve the significant oak trees in the center of the site. So this will be kind of a natural progression or extension off of the city park area just to the south. And again, this was done to help preserve these beautiful oak trees in the center here, which are very large in size, but will also act as kind of a natural habitat corridor for species that traversed through this area.
Will all that area there be owned by us, or will that be just an outlet to them?
It will probably more than likely be owned by us. Yep, so it'll be its own outlot at some point, or basically an extension to the park area.
Then are we gonna have to be mowing that and doing all kinds of maintenance in there?
I don't think we've figured out how we're going to be maintaining it, but it will have more of a natural look and maintenance to it. So there might be kind of a natural trail running through here, but I would imagine that would be the extent of it.
Be a lot of, and then in the proposed park, then will there be playground equipment put in there?
Yeah, they're still trying to detail out how the proposed park area is going to be programmed. So they are looking at different elements of play equipment and recreational courts and passive areas as well. So they're waiting until this neighborhood fills in a little bit more to figure out, again, you know, what the residents are saying they need or want.
But the intent would be like our normal neighborhood park, that you'd have some kind of play structure there that,
right,
you know, would give entertainment to kids and stuff.
Correct.
I assume that. Again, I couldn't get to these drawings, so I wasn't too worried because this is a concept, so we'll see again.
Correct. And then in terms of how residents will be able to connect both into the park and to the conservation corridor area from the north side, they are proposing an outlet or passage area in between 2 of the lots to provide access into the conservation corridor on the west side. They're also showing an additional park entrance in line with Farm Hill Boulevard, which is similar to the same that they did just to the south here off of Vista View Drive. So that will be an additional park entrance. And then they also have an opening at the north end of their easterly cul-de-sac to provide access into that conservation corridor area.
We don't have to have any parking available because this is a neighborhood park, so it's more of a walking, biking park, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, screening is going to be important, mainly along the Savannah Way side. In our encouragement and comments to the applicant are, of course, to stay similar with what's being proposed on both sides of Savannah Way. So that would be some berming mixed with some deciduous and coniferous trees along that stretch. And then in terms of setbacks, from the collector road, there's a certain centerline setback of 100 feet that the lots abutting that edge would have to meet. There are some wooded steep slopes kind of on the northern edge that the lots backing up to those would also have to meet. Public open space does require a rear setback as well. And then wetlands is also another piece that needs to be have a buffer area of 30 feet from the edge of them for protection purposes. Which kind of gets me into my next topic of the considerations of the layout that they've shown. So a couple things I want to note. The first one being with the westerly cul-de-sac, which is basically where the villa lots are proposed. There are a couple areas where the edge of the lots do back up to some of these significant trees. And it would be important to understand how close that is during the preliminary, but are there ways for the lots to provide as much separation as possible from the edge of these trees where they can? It seems like there might be some area to play with to maybe move the cul-de-sac a little bit more westerly to, again, get out of the critical root zones of these significant trees. Because as you back up to these trees with the lot lines, the grading also goes up to those edges for the most part. So really understanding kind of what those impacts are to these trees will be important in the preliminary. So we've noted that as something to consider and watch for the applicant as they're preparing their preliminary plan. And then on the east side, a couple things. The easterly cul-de-sac, which is their legacy lots or where the green lots are proposed. There is that significant wetland that I noted earlier, kind of abutting the edge of Savannah Way, but also in the rear yards of some of these lots. Typically, we don't allow lots into the buffer areas or into the wetland areas themselves, as they tend to be impacted not only with the improvements that happen out there, but long term with the ownership of these lots, the wetlands tend to get encroached into over time. So there are 4 lots that we've kind of highlighted to the applicant to really look at and see if the feasibility in these, or if there's a way to help reorient or realign somehow to get these lots outside of the buffer and wetland areas is kind of the key for that edge.
Maybe they make them villas, a smaller lot, so they don't need to be so deep.
Yeah, the legacy lots are typically smaller in size in terms of their product. So again, until we get a little bit more details on what they're proposing out there layout wise, we'll be able to understand kind of what the true impacts are. It still feels a little squeezed in that area in particular, so we just want them to really take a look at that and evaluate it for the preliminary. And then lastly, if you've had a chance to go out there, but you can even see it somewhat on this drawing, there is a steep grade as you go north on the site, or northeast on the site. So the difference in grade between basically the green lots and the blue lots is going to be pretty significant. So we would imagine that there will be a level of retaining walls implemented in the rear yards of some of these homes. So we'll need additional information of that in the preliminary and how they plan to manage and maintain that, or how it plans to be maintained in the future.
It's just that standard double sidewalk. Really won't be any trails, just sidewalks that'll go to the parks and the wetlands.
Correct. Yep. They'll have sidewalks on both sides of the streets. There won't be any public trails along the street edges. They'll have some trail opportunities in the public park space and maybe some passive trails in that conservation corridor, but everything else within the neighborhood wise would be sidewalks.
There's still a trail in Savannah Way though, right?
There is, yep, on the east side. So they'll be able to connect into that.
Yep, right.
Yep. And then the trail will extend on the south side, or sorry, on the north side of County Road 44 with the construction that they're doing on there now. So that'll basically connect into the trail that stubs off closer to the Mount Pleasant Cemetery, or I'm sorry, Guardian Angels Cemetery. So they'll have a pretty good pedestrian system in place once they start building out here. And then this slide is just showing the house products that they're proposing. So they have their typical single family product on the top here. The traditional detached single family that you see in their existing Harvest, and even on the south side of the Harvest West neighborhood is kind of in this northwest image. Their legacy product, which is kind of their newer housing product, they're still working on kind of the architecturals of that. But again, it'll still read as your typical detached single family for that. And then the villa product is below. So you have the side load garage on the bottom left here, and then the front load garage villa on the bottom right. So a couple other items that are worth mentioning. So the site will be platted. So that'll be the next step in the process, is they'll have to come in for preliminary plat and rezoning. They've stated that they'll more than likely phase out the development. So instead of just platting it or final platting it in one chunk, they'll do it in a couple phases. And then lastly, they'll rezone the property to a PRD zoning district, a planned residential district, which is pretty typical and common in these newer detached single family developments. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion tonight to adopt resolution number 2020-59, which is approving the concept plan for the Harvest West North, and then based on the conditions that are listed within that resolution. I am happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I believe we do. Yep, we have the developer also in attendance if you have questions for them.
Hey Liz, for kind of the Harvest area, that's kind of the last, am I looking at that right? That's really the last development in that space. There's really nothing more kind of that north of Big Woods, east of 212 space, right?
Correct. Yep. In terms of what they have for holdings right now, that's the last of their residential piece.
All right, anyone else have questions for Liz or the developer? I think, again, this is concept, so this is just basically laying it out, and then we'll see it again before it goes into a couple times before it's final.
I do like the concept. I mean, like I said, I looked at it. The only thing that drew attention to me, and I think Liz for kind of connecting the roads there, is that it's a new development that really almost all has cul-de-sacs. I mean, that's really all it is. It's 3 cul-de-sacs. They're coming off existing roads, which seems a little different than we typically see. Now, I get it, because if you try to connect the roads, you're going to go through that conservatory space where the trees are. That becomes difficult, but it now makes a little bit better when I can kind of connect the other streets and the other entrances. It stuck out to me a little bit as a development that basically is 3 long cul-de-sacs versus 3 roads. So.
Well, and with just the terrain, I don't think you have any other options.
A lot.
Yep.
You could connect 2 of them, but then you'd lose some lots. You know, that's the trade-off.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, but then looking at where the trees were made sense. I think the only thing, and Liz touched on it, was just water drainage, like, retaining walls into other people's, where does the water go? And just making sure that that is planned appropriately. But like you said, it's concept, so.
Right, and just to make sure that we don't see anything that we don't really care for there, and that'll be stuff that, I mean, a lot of people like living on a cul-de-sac, so I'm not too concerned about a cul-de-sac. I like the fact that they saved all the trees. We all know what it's like with trees, and they're saving as many trees as possible.
think overall, I really like the fact that this particular development is actually kind of pulled back from the highway a little bit too, which is nice because some of them, like, they just push the houses, the backyards are right up against the highway as close as they can. This one's got some space. And I do appreciate the fact they had that conservation corridor, because they could easily have said, well, let's not preserve the trees and let's just blow right through that. That I think adds more value to the homes in that community because it gives that the woodland feel, and a lot of them don't back up to other houses. I would like to, and I know that Liz mentioned the staff report, of having the berming and trees match what's on the other side of Savannah Way. I know we pushed really hard for that, in planning commission when we had, when we had originally done the harvest. So to me, that's really important to make sure we do that right. So it has that mirror image of that set. So that way it's not like one side is those beautiful berms and trees and, or at least has that sense of like, hey, we have like a really well thoughtful product on one side, and the other side we're just building houses right up against the road. So I think that's really important that we take away. We emphasize that.
You may have said this, I might probably missed it. What are the widths of the lots?
I can go back to that exhibit showing.
What's your question? What are the widths of the lots?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. 53.
So the villa lots are kind of like that smaller product. So they're ranging around a 53-foot wide lot. And then you have the legacy lots that are a little bit bigger, but will kind of be a little bit smaller product as well. So they'll range around the 55-foot wide. And then the heritage lots are kind of their traditional detached single family at around 65-foot wide.
That's consistent with what's in the harvest now.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And the only thing I observe about the harvest is that it does seem every time I go in that area, the houses seem really close to each other. And I get it. That's where everything gets built these days. I'm just thinking of visibility because it will be a very visible neighborhood from 212 as you're coming through town, by town. And I'm sure we'll do it right because we have good eyes on it and everything like that. But I just think of other developments that have major highways, not in Chaska, that go by towns, and it just looks like suburbia. So that I'm just mindful of that because this will be very visible when you're traveling on 212, looking that direction into that to kind of what it looks like. So
actually, you probably won't see very much of it. That berm along 212 is really substantially tall.
You can see the south one, right? That one's, is that what I'm thinking of? You see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The south area near Big Woods Boulevard, that's a little more exposed. This part that we're talking about tonight is very well screened already from the berm adjacent to 212.
Okay. Good clarification. Thank you. All right. Further questions? If we're all good?
Good.
Everybody good? All right. I would entertain a motion then to adopt resolution 2020-59 approving concept plan for Harvest West.
I would like to move to adopt resolution 2020-59 approving concept plan for Harvest West.
Motion by Councilmember Wong.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hatfield. Again, adopting resolution 2020-59 concept for Harvest West. Discussion. Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Aye.
Councilmember Grah.
Yes.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Mayor Winchell, aye. Passes 5-0. All right, that moves us into 8C now. Is there a thing that I have to read here? Or?
So real quick, this is a closed session. It is a client privilege review of a pending case that we have in litigation. I think what you should read is the statement that's on the bottom of the agenda. If you scroll down to the very bottom of the agenda, there's a, I think if you read that and then actually make a motion to go into closed session, we'll have to go into closed session and then you guys will have to open back up into open session after we're done going through this item.
So basically, this notice, Chaska City Council will hold a special closed meeting on Monday, July 20th And the Chaska Event Center located at, I don't know, it's got all city hall stuff, so I'm gonna say at the Chaska Event Center on County Road 61 in Chaska, Minnesota. Council will close the meeting and hold a special session with its attorneys as authorized under attorney-client privilege pursuant Minnesota statute 13D-05 sub 3B to discuss the following pending litigation: Dennis C. Lackey plaintiff versus City of Chaska, civil number 19-855 SRN BRT. So I would need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Hubbard,
Second.
second by Councilmember McGraw. Discussion. All right, Councilmember Hubbard,
Yes.
Councilmember McGraw,
Yes.
Councilmember Hatfield,
Yes.
Long.
Aye.
Mayor Winchell, yes. All right, we will go ahead and close the session at 8:22. Now, do you make sure, Kevin, everyone's off that's not supposed to be on?
My question is, does anyone need to be on?
I don't believe so. I think, Jason, you're the only one that's